The rain fell in heavy sheets across the mansion's immaculate grounds, washing away the carefully planned perfection of what should have been the wedding of the year. Through the downpour, a lone figure in white stumbled along the empty road, the once pristine wedding gown now a sodden weight dragging behind her. Her makeup streaked down her face, indistinguishable from the rain or tears. She didn't know where she was going, only what she was running from. As headlights approached through the darkness, she faltered, her heel breaking as she collapsed onto the gravel shoulder. The truck slowed and a man leaned out, concern etched across his weathered face. Without hesitation, he draped his jacket over her trembling shoulders. "I won't ask any questions," he said simply, his voice barely audible above the storm. And in that moment, soaked to the bone and desperate for shelter from more than just the rain, she decided to trust him. The cabin sat nestled among towering pines at the edge of the lake, its weathered exterior betraying years of quiet resilience against the elements. Inside, the woman who had introduced herself only as Lila sat wrapped in a faded quilt, her elegant manicure a stark contrast against the worn fabric. The fire in the hearth cast dancing shadows across the modest living room as she clutched a mug of tea between her palms, steam rising like the secrets she wasn't ready to share. Caleb moved quietly around the kitchen, giving her the space that instinct told him she needed. He'd seen that look before, the hollow gaze of someone fleeing something they couldn't outrun. "You should rest," he said, nodding toward the small guest bedroom. "We can figure things out in the morning." The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second a reminder that her old life was slipping further away. Lila nodded but made no move to stand. The thought of closing her eyes terrified her. What if they found her while she slept? "I should go," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'm putting you at risk by being here." Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the mug and rose to her feet. The borrowed flannel shirt and sweatpants hung loosely on her frame, a far cry from the couture that usually adorned her body. As she reached for the door handle, a small sound from the corner of the room stopped her. There, curled beneath a homemade afghan with a tattered stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, slept a little girl no more than 7 years old. Golden curls framed her peaceful face, illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby lantern. Lila's hand fell away from the door. "That's Emma," Caleb said softly, coming to stand beside her. "My daughter. I didn't want to wake her when we came in. She falls asleep waiting for me sometimes on late shifts." Lila felt something twist inside her chest, a recognition of innocence she'd forgotten existed in the world. "I didn't realize you had a child," she murmured, suddenly self-conscious about the intrusion she represented. Caleb gently lifted Emma from the armchair, cradling her against his chest with practiced ease. "It's just the two of us," he explained, his voice low as he carried her toward a bedroom down the narrow hallway. When he returned, he found Lila still standing by the door, but the desperate urgency had faded from her posture. They sat in silence for a while, the crackling fire filling the space between them. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. Emma was barely 4, too young to understand why her mom couldn't come home from the hospital." His fingers absently traced the worn leather of the armrest. "I used to work in private security. Good money, but the hours were killing me. After Sarah died, I couldn't justify being away from Emma that much. So now I fix boat engines at the marina. It's enough." The simple sincerity of his words hung in the air. No pretense, no agenda, just the unvarnished truth of a life recalibrated by loss. Lila studied his face, the fine lines around his eyes speaking of both grief and moments of joy found in its wake. "If I told you I just ran away from a $4 million wedding," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "would you think I was crazy?" Caleb's expression didn't change. He gazed into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "I watched the woman I loved fight cancer with a smile on her face, pretending everything would be okay even when we both knew it wouldn't." He turned to look at her. "Everyone has their reasons for running. Sometimes staying would be the crazier choice." Lila felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. For the first time in years, she was speaking to someone who didn't want anything from her. No connections, no favors, no strategic alliance disguised as affection. It wasn't his words that created the fragile trust blooming between them, but rather what he didn't say, the questions he didn't ask, the judgments he withheld. "Thank you," she said simply. "For the tea, for not asking." Caleb nodded, understanding passing between them like a current. "Get some sleep, Lila. Whatever you're running from, it'll still be there in the morning. But maybe in the daylight, it won't seem quite so impossible." As she finally retreated to the small guest room with its patchwork quilt and faded curtains, Lila realized it was the first genuine advice she'd received in longer than she could remember. Tomorrow would come with its complications, but for tonight, in this simple cabin, with its honest inhabitants, she allowed herself to breathe. Morning came with a gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through pine branches to dapple the cabin's wooden floors. Lila woke, disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings momentarily confusing until the events of the previous night crashed back into her consciousness. The borrowed clothes, the stranger's kindness, the desperate flight through the rain. It hadn't been a dream. She sat up slowly, running her fingers through tangled hair that yesterday had been styled by Manhattan's most sought-after stylist. The scent of coffee and something sweet pulled her from the bedroom. In the kitchen, she found Emma perched on a stool at the counter, small legs swinging as she concentrated on pouring batter into a pan. Caleb stood nearby, watchful but allowing his daughter the independence she clearly cherished. "You have to wait until you see the little bubbles before you flip it," Emma was explaining seriously to herself, spatula poised and ready. When she spotted Lila, her eyes widened with curiosity. "Oh, you're the lady from last night. Dad said you needed a place to stay because of the storm. Do you like blueberry pancakes? I put in extra because they're the best kind." The child's unguarded welcome brought an unexpected smile to Lila's face. "I love blueberry pancakes. Thank you for making them." Caleb handed her a steaming mug of coffee. "Hope you slept okay," he said, his tone casual but his eyes searching her face, assessing her state after the night's drama. Before she could respond, his attention shifted to something outside the window. A frown creased his brow as he reached for the newspaper that had been delivered to the porch. He scanned the front page, and Lila watched as recognition dawned in his expression. Without a word, he placed the paper on the counter, turning it so she could see. The headline screamed in bold type, "Stratmore CEO vanishes from own wedding." Beneath it, a photo of Lila in business attire from a recent economic forum, her expression confident and composed, the perfect corporate leader. The smaller caption read, "Billion-dollar merger in question as Elizabeth Stratmore disappears during ceremony to industrial heir James Harrington." Lila felt the blood drain from her face. She snatched the paper, eyes darting across the article that detailed her mysterious disappearance and speculated about mental health issues, cold feet, or possible foul play. The words blurred as panic rose in her throat. "You knew?" she demanded, looking up at Caleb with accusation burning in her eyes. "Did you know who I was last night?" Caleb shook his head, genuine surprise evident in his expression. "No. I don't follow business news much. I had no idea you were—" He glanced at the paper. "Elizabeth Stratmore? You said your name was Lila?" "It's my middle name," she said automatically, still clutching the newspaper so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I can't believe this. They're making it sound like I had some kind of breakdown." Her voice rose with indignation. "The merger? That's what they're worried about? Not the fact that I discovered my fiancé was only marrying me for controlling interest in my company?" Emma had stopped her pancake ministrations, sensing the sudden tension in the room. "Dad?" she questioned uncertainly. Caleb placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "It's okay, Em. Why don't you go get dressed while I talk with our guest?" Once Emma had reluctantly left the kitchen, he turned back to Lila. "I'm sorry about the newspaper, but nothing has changed from last night. You're still welcome here until you figure things out." But something had changed. Lila could feel it. The wall of her real identity now standing between them. The simplicity of being just a woman in distress had vanished, replaced by the complicated reality of who she actually was. A CEO, an heiress, a woman whose life decisions made front-page news. "I should go," she said, pushing away from the counter. "I've already imposed enough. I'll call a car service and be out of your way." Caleb watched her, his expression unreadable. "Running again?" he asked quietly. "Seems like that's what got you here in the first place." The words stopped her cold. "You have no idea what my life is like," she said, anger flaring. "The people I deal with, they'll track me down eventually, and when they do, you don't want to be involved. Trust me." "Maybe not," he conceded, "but Emma made pancakes for 3, and there's no reason to leave hungry just because some newspaper printed your real name." As if summoned by mention of her name, Emma reappeared in the doorway, now dressed in overalls, with mismatched socks. "Are you leaving?" she asked Lila, disappointment evident in her small voice. "But we were going to make cookies today. Dad said we could use the special vanilla." Lila felt herself caught between worlds. The high-stakes corporate battlefield she'd fled, and this simple domestic scene that offered an unexpected respite. The genuine disappointment in the child's eyes somehow weighed more than the expectations of board members and shareholders. She began, then faltered. The absurdity of the situation suddenly struck her. Elizabeth Stratmore, named among the 50 most powerful women in business last year, rendered speechless by a 7-year-old's invitation to bake cookies. "Home breakfast," she finally conceded, lowering herself back onto the stool, "and maybe cookies. Then I really do need to figure out my next steps." The relief on Emma's face was immediate and luminous as she scrambled back to her pancake station. Caleb said nothing, but the subtle nod he gave Lila conveyed understanding. The newspaper lay forgotten on the counter as the strange trio settled into a breakfast that none of them could have anticipated 24 hours earlier. The delicate truce established over breakfast shattered 3 days later. Lila had settled into an uneasy routine at the cabin, sleeping in the guest room, helping with meals, and spending hours with Emma, whose unfiltered enthusiasm provided a welcome distraction from the chaos she'd left behind. She'd made discreet calls to her most trusted assistant, arranging for access to emergency funds and monitoring the fallout from her abrupt departure. But she'd told herself, and Caleb, that she needed just a few more days of anonymity before facing the storm. That illusion of control collapsed on a rain-soaked Thursday afternoon. Emma was teaching Leela how to play an elaborate card game of her own invention when the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the patter of raindrops on the roof. Caleb, who had been repairing a boat motor on the covered porch, came inside quickly, his expression grim. "Black SUV," he said simply. "2 men. They don't look like locals." Lila's stomach clenched as she rose from the table. She'd been naive to think she could hide here for even this long. "I'll handle this," she said, moving toward the door. "It's probably James's security team. They won't make a scene if I agree to go with them." Caleb blocked her path, his posture shifting subtly into something more alert, more defensive. "Are you in danger from these people?" "Not physically," she replied, though uncertainty flickered across her face. "James wouldn't—" She stopped, reconsidering. "I don't know anymore. His family has a lot invested in the merger that my disappearance jeopardized." Before Caleb could respond, heavy knocks rattled the wooden door. Emma pressed herself against her father's side, suddenly frightened by the tension filling the small cabin. "Miss Stratmore," a deep voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. Mr. Harrington is concerned for your well-being and has sent us to escort you back to New York." Lila closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. When she opened them, the vulnerable woman of the past few days had vanished, replaced by the composed executive accustomed to navigating hostile takeovers and boardroom power plays. "Let me handle this," she repeated to Caleb, her voice low but firm. She opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits standing on the porch, rain dripping from their expensive outerwear. The larger of the 2 stepped forward, his expression a practiced mask of professional concern. "Mrs. Stratmore, I'm Davis, head of security for the Harrington family. We've been very worried about your sudden disappearance. Mr. Harrington has asked that we bring you back immediately to address some urgent matters regarding the company merger." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lila stated flatly. "Please inform James that I'm perfectly safe and will be in touch with my legal team shortly regarding the dissolution of our engagement and any pending business arrangements." The security guard's polite facade slipped slightly. "I'm afraid I must insist, Ms. Stratmore. We have documentation here." He produced a folder from inside his jacket. that authorizes us to secure your safety and return you to New York. Your father signed off on it, concerned about your mental state." Lila felt her blood run cold. "My father has no legal authority over me. I'm 34 years old. Nevertheless," the man continued, "we also have papers regarding the temporary hold on your assets pending a full investigation. This property," he gestured to the cabin, "appears to be leased under your corporate account, which falls under those restrictions." Behind her, Lila heard Caleb's sharp intake of breath. She hadn't told him the cabin rental company was a subsidiary of one of her investment properties. She hadn't thought it mattered. "That's enough," Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Lila. "This is private property and you're not welcome here. Miss Stratmore has made her position clear." The second guard moved forward, his hand shifting toward what Lila realized with horror might be a concealed weapon. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. We're here on legitimate business." "My daughter is inside," Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet. "So yes, it absolutely concerns me." The tension escalated as Davis made a grab for Lila's arm. Caleb reacted instantly, blocking the movement and pushing the larger man back. The second guard lunged forward, shoving Caleb hard enough that he stumbled backward, losing his footing on the wet porch and falling heavily against the railing. Something snapped in Lila at the sight of Caleb struggling to regain his balance. Without thinking, she positioned herself between the guards and the cabin door, where Emma's frightened face was now visible through the window. "Touch them again," she said, her voice vibrating with a cold fury that had made corporate rivals quake. "And you're touching me. And believe me when I say that the Harrington family does not want the publicity of assaulting a woman who already fled their son's wedding." She held out her hand. "Give me those papers." When Davis hesitated, she narrowed her eyes. "Now, or the next call I make will be to every financial reporter in my contact list, detailing exactly how the Harrington family conducts business." The men exchanged glances before reluctantly handing over the folder. Lila scanned the contents quickly, her expression darkening. Without hesitation, she pulled a pen from her pocket and signed several of the documents with decisive strokes. "There," she said, thrusting the papers back at them. "I've signed the release forfeiting my claim to any joint assets established during our engagement. In exchange, you will leave immediately and ensure that this property and its occupants remain untouched by either the Harrington family or my father's interests." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "And you tell James that if he ever sends people after me again, everything I know about his family's business practices goes public. Are we clear?" The men retreated, their mission partially accomplished but their authority thoroughly undermined. As the black SUV pulled away, the adrenaline that had sustained Lila suddenly evaporated. She turned to find Caleb watching her with an unreadable expression, one hand rubbing his shoulder where he'd hit the railing. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled across the lake. But the real tempest was brewing inside, as Caleb checked that Emma was okay before closing the cabin door. "You didn't mention the cabin was connected to you," he said quietly, once Emma had retreated to her room with a book. "I didn't think it mattered," Lila replied, suddenly exhausted. "It's just one of dozens of properties under a holding company. I didn't even make the connection until they mentioned it." Caleb shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "They found you here, Lila, or Elizabeth, or whoever you are. They found you, and they brought legal paperwork and men who carry guns to enforce it." His voice remained low, but the intensity behind his words was unmistakable. "My daughter lives here. I can't have people like that showing up at our door." The unspoken accusation hung between them. "You brought this danger into our lives." Lila felt the weight of it pressing against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. "I never meant for any of this to touch you or Emma. I thought I could just disappear for a while." "People like you don't get to disappear," Caleb replied. No judgment in his tone, just a simple statement of fact. "Your life is too big, too connected to too many other lives." Lila sank onto the couch, suddenly overwhelmed by the truth of his words. "I thought I could live quietly, just for a little while," she whispered. "But now you and Emma have been dragged into my mess." Outside, a branch cracked under the storm's assault, slapping against the window like an exclamation point to her words. The cabin itself, which had seemed so solid and safe just hours before, now felt vulnerable to forces beyond its sturdy walls. Caleb's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "You stood between those men and my daughter," he acknowledged. "That counts for something." Page Red Weather celebrates the first female headliner. "It's the least I could do after bringing this to your doorstep," Lila replied. She gazed around the small living room that had become an unexpected sanctuary. "What will you do now?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof. "I think it's time Emma and I moved on," he finally said. "This place, it has too many memories anyway. Sarah loved it here. Maybe it's time for a fresh start somewhere new." "Because of me," Lila said, the realization settling heavily between them. "Because I won't have Emma caught in adult problems she didn't create," he corrected gently. "She's already lost too much in her short life. I won't risk her feeling unsafe in her own home." The finality in his voice told Lila everything she needed to know. Whatever fragile connection had formed between them over these brief days, the shared meals, the quiet conversations by the fire after Emma had gone to bed, the tentative understanding that had begun to blossom, it was ending before it had truly begun. "I understand," she said, rising to her feet. "I'll be gone by morning. I can arrange for a car service without involving anyone connected to James or my father." Caleb didn't argue, and somehow his acceptance hurt more than any protest would have. They had both recognized the fundamental truth. Their worlds were too different, the collision too disruptive to sustain. As Lila packed the few belongings she'd accumulated during her brief stay, she paused at the small drawing Emma had given her just that morning, a crayon rendering of 3 figures standing beside a blue lake, the smallest one holding hands with both of the taller ones. Beneath it, in careful child's handwriting, "My dad, me, and Lila at our lake." She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her bag, a reminder of 3 days when she had almost believed in the possibility of a simpler life. 2 months passed like ships in the night, carrying Lila and Caleb in opposite directions across unseen currents. True to his word, Caleb had relocated with Emma to a coastal town 50 miles north, where a former security colleague had offered him work at a larger marina. The cabin by the lake stood empty, its memories packed away, like the photographs of Sarah that still remained in boxes Caleb couldn't bring himself to open. For Lila, re-entry into her former life had been a calculated exercise in damage control. She had emerged from hiding with a carefully crafted narrative about needing time to reconsider the merger that her marriage to James would have cemented. The business world had buzzed with speculation, dubbing her the runaway CEO bride, and countless think pieces about women in leadership. But Lila had weathered worse storms in her climb to the top, and her company remained stable under her decisive leadership. Yet something had shifted inside her. In board meetings and investor calls, she found herself increasingly impatient with the political maneuvering and status signaling that had once seemed a natural part of her world. At charity galas and industry dinners, the conversations felt hollow, the connections transactional in ways she could no longer ignore. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Lila stood at the podium of a women's leadership conference, delivering a keynote about resilience in business. The audience of aspiring executives hung on her every polished word, their admiration palpable. But as applause washed over her, Lila felt a profound emptiness. The successful CEO addressing the crowd seemed like a character she was playing rather than herself. Her thoughts drifted to Emma's uninhibited laughter as they had built sandcastles by the lake, to Caleb's quiet strength as he taught his daughter to bait a fishing hook. Those moments had contained more authenticity than anything she'd experienced in the months since her return. Across the miles, in a small apartment above a boat repair shop, Emma sat at a child-sized desk, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she carefully formed letters on a sheet of notebook paper. Caleb watched from the doorway, his heart aching at the determined set of his daughter's shoulders, so like her mother's. "Is this how you spell friend, Dad?" Emma asked, holding up the paper for inspection. Caleb moved closer, noting the slightly crooked letters spelling out, "Dear Lila, are you still my friend? Dad gets sad when I talk about you." "That's right, Pumpkin," he said softly, his throat tightening. "But who are you writing to?" "Lila," Emma answered matter-of-factly. "I miss her cookies. And her stories. And she never said if we're still friends." Caleb had been careful not to discuss Leela in front of Emma, hoping his daughter's memory of their brief house guest would fade with time. Clearly, he had underestimated the impact those few days had made on his child. "Honey, we don't have Lila's address," he explained gently, "and she's very busy with her important job. Remember how we talked about that?" Emma's small face fell, but then brightened with the resilience of childhood. "Maybe we could mail it to the lake house, and then it could get forwarded?" Before Caleb could formulate a response that wouldn't crush his daughter's hopes, Emma had already sealed the letter in an envelope and was carefully printing Lila in large block letters across the front. He didn't have the heart to tell her that mail addressed so simply would never find its intended recipient. Yet through some alignment of fate, determination, and the kindness of a rural postal worker who remembered the fancy lady staying with the widower and his little girl, Emma's letter eventually made its way to Lila's office. It arrived on the same day Lila was scheduled to announce a major new direction for her company, a venture capital fund specifically targeting women-owned businesses in underserved communities. As her assistant laid out the day's correspondence, the childish handwriting on the small envelope immediately caught Lila's attention. She tore it open, her normally steady hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the simple note. The board members were already assembling in the conference room when Lila made an unprecedented decision. Without explanation, she canceled the meeting and instructed her assistant to book her on the next flight to the coastal region, where she believed Caleb and Emma had relocated. It took 3 days of discreet inquiries before she found them. The marina owner, initially suspicious of the elegant woman asking about his mechanic, finally relented when Lila explained that she simply wanted to return something important to the little girl. When she finally spotted Caleb on the dock, methodically cleaning boat parts in the late afternoon sun, Lila found herself frozen in place. He looked different somehow, more at ease in this setting than he had at the lake cabin, his movements confident and purposeful. Only when he straightened and turned, sensing her presence, did she see the familiar shadow of loss that still lingered in his eyes. Recognition washed over his face, followed by disbelief and something else she couldn't quite name. For a long moment they simply stood looking at each other across the weathered planks of the dock. Then, as if by mutual agreement, they moved to a bench overlooking the harbor. A light rain had begun to fall, not unlike the night they'd first met. "How did you find us?" Caleb asked finally, his voice neither welcoming nor hostile, simply curious. "Emma's letter," Lila replied, pulling the creased paper from her purse. "Apparently the postal service is more efficient than I gave it credit for." A small smile tugged at the corner of Caleb's mouth. "She'll be thrilled it reached you. She talks about you all the time. Her friend with the pretty dresses who makes the best chocolate chip cookies." "I had help with those," Lila admitted. "I'd never actually baked cookies before Emma showed me how." Silence settled between them, filled with unspoken questions and the gentle rhythm of raindrops on the harbor. "I thought you would hate me," Lila said finally, watching a seagull dive toward the water's surface. "For bringing chaos into your lives, for making you leave your home." Caleb shook his head slowly. "We needed a change anyway. Too many ghosts at the lake." He turned to face her directly. "Why are you here, Lila? Really?" The directness of his question caught her off guard, though it shouldn't have. Caleb had never been one for social niceties or corporate doublespeak. "I thought I wanted my old life back," she said honestly. "The company, the status, the control. And I got it all back, even stronger than before, actually. The board respects me more now that I've proven I won't be manipulated into a merger that wasn't in our best interests." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But it feels hollow, empty, like I'm playing a part in someone else's story." Rain collected on Caleb's shoulders as he listened, making no move to seek shelter. "I keep thinking about those 3 days at the cabin," Lila continued, her voice softer now. "How real everything felt, how present I was, not planning the next move or calculating the risks and rewards of every interaction. Just living." "That's just regular life for most people," Caleb said, but there was no judgment in his tone. "Nothing special about pancakes and card games and fishing off the dock." They were special to me, Lila insisted. You and Emma. You showed me something I didn't know I was missing. Caleb's expression remained guarded. We're not a vacation from real life, Lila. This is who we are. Simple people with simple problems. No private jets or billion-dollar decisions. Just trying to make rent and hoping the school doesn't call because Emma put glue in someone's hair again. Lila couldn't help but smile at that. She's creative. She's a handful, Caleb corrected, but his eyes softened with obvious love for his daughter. I'm afraid, Lila admitted after another pause. Afraid you'll look at me someday and see all the ways I don't fit into your world, that you'll resent me for not being ordinary enough. Caleb studied her face, his expression thoughtful. And I've been afraid you'd realize I have nothing to offer someone like you. No connections, no fancy education, nothing that would impress the people in your world. The honesty of his admission broke something open between them, a recognition that beneath their external differences, they shared the same fundamental fears. Emma's been asking if we could visit the lake again, Caleb said finally. She misses feeding the ducks. I bought the cabin, Lila replied, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. After you left. It felt wrong to let it go to strangers. Caleb's surprise was evident. Why? I don't know, she answered truthfully. Maybe I needed a place that reminded me of what matters. Or maybe I just wanted to keep the possibility open that someday. She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. Understanding passed between them, fragile but real. Would you like to see Emma? Caleb asked. She gets out of school in about 20 minutes. She'll never forgive me if she finds out you were here and didn't say hello. Relief washed over Lila's face. I'd like that very much. As they walked together toward the elementary school, matching their pace in unconscious synchronicity, the rain lightened to a gentle mist. Neither made promises or declarations. It was too soon, the distance between their worlds still too vast to navigate with certainty. But as Emma burst through the school doors and spotted them waiting together, her face lighting up with pure joy, both Lila and Caleb recognized that some connections transcend the boundaries of circumstance. Emma raced toward them, her backpack bouncing wildly. You came back, she exclaimed, flinging herself at Lila with complete trust. Did you get my letter? Are we still friends? Lila knelt down, meeting the child at eye level. We will always be friends, she said firmly, holding Emma's small hands in her own. Because I don't want to be just a visitor in your life anymore. Over Emma's head, her eyes met Caleb's, a question and an offer in her gaze. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time in both their lives, the possibilities seemed limited, only by their courage to embrace them. 6 months later, a very different kind of gathering took place at a renovated community center in the heart of the coastal town. The Elizabeth Stratmore Foundation for Family Resilience was celebrating its official launch, with a focus on supporting single parents and survivors of coercive relationships. The modest building had been transformed for the evening, with simple but elegant decorations and a warmth that reflected the foundation's mission. Lila stood at the podium, dressed in a tailored suit that managed to bridge her corporate past and more relaxed present. The audience before her included local families, social workers, and a handful of business associates who had supported her vision for the foundation. When I left my wedding 7 months ago, she began, her voice steady and authentic. It wasn't just about escaping a bad relationship. It was about recognizing that I had built a life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt empty within. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. I was fortunate enough to find shelter, both physical and emotional, with people who showed me what real connection looks like, who taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are, not as others expect us to be. In the front row, Caleb watched with quiet pride, Emma nestled against his side. The past months had brought changes for all of them. Lila dividing her time between running her company remotely and building a life in the coastal community. Caleb expanding his work to include a boat tour business that utilized his knowledge of local waters. Emma blossoming with the stability of their unconventional family arrangement. This foundation isn't about charity, Lila continued. It's about creating pathways to independence and healing for those who have found themselves in situations where their autonomy and sense of self have been compromised. Because everyone deserves the chance to rewrite their story. As she spoke, Caleb reflected on how their own story had evolved. The cabin by the lake had become a weekend retreat for the three of them, a place where memories of both past and present coexisted in a delicate balance. His photographs of Sarah now hung alongside new images, Emma teaching Lila to skip stones across the water, the three of them building a treehouse together, quiet evenings watching fireflies from the dock. After the presentation, reporters and local officials gathered around Lila, eager to discuss the Foundation's initiatives. She answered their questions with the same precision and confidence that had made her a formidable CEO, but there was a new quality to her interactions, a groundedness that came from knowing her worth extended beyond balance sheets and market shares. When the crowd finally thinned, a journalist from a national business magazine approached her. "Mr. Stratmore, there's been speculation about your personal life since your unconventional exit from the Harrington wedding. Would you care to comment on rumors that you've been splitting your time between Manhattan and this small coastal town?" Lila smiled, neither confirming nor denying. "My priority these days is building things that matter, both professionally and personally." "And what about marriage?" the reporter pressed. "Any plans to try again, perhaps with someone less connected to your corporate interests?" Before Lila could respond, Emma darted forward, slipping her small hand into Lila's with the easy confidence of a child who knows she belongs. Caleb followed at a more measured pace, his presence solid and reassuring as he came to stand beside them. "We don't need a piece of paper to know this is home," Lila said simply, the warmth in her eyes as she looked at Caleb and Emma conveying more than any formal announcement could have. Later that evening, as a gentle rain, so reminiscent of the night they first met, fell outside, the three of them walked hand in hand along the shore. Emma skipped ahead occasionally, collecting shells and reporting her findings with enthusiastic detail. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked quietly. "Giving up the simplicity of your old life, the clarity of just being CEO Elizabeth Stratmore, without all this complexity?" Lila considered the question seriously, her gaze following Emma as the child balanced carefully on a piece of driftwood. "My life before wasn't simple," she finally answered. "It was isolated, controlled. I had one identity that consumed everything else." She turned to look at him directly. "This is more complicated, certainly, messy sometimes, but it's real in a way nothing else has ever been." Caleb nodded, understanding. They had both given up certainties for this uncharted territory between their worlds. He, the protective isolation he'd built around himself and Emma after Sarah's death. She, the singular focus on corporate success that had defined her for so long. "Emma wants a dog," he said, changing the subject, with the pragmatic pivot that was so characteristically him. Lila laughed, the sound carrying across the misty shoreline. "Of course she does. Let me guess. Something enormous and unruly?" "A Bernese mountain dog specifically. She's been researching. Apparently they're good with water, which she finds critical for our lifestyle." The easy domesticity of the conversation wrapped around them like a comfortable blanket. They had found their rhythm in this blended existence. Weekdays in town, where Lila could manage her company remotely and Emma could attend school. Weekends at the lake cabin, disconnected from technology and reconnected with each other. The rain intensified, but none of them moved to seek shelter. Instead, Emma twirled with her face upturned to the sky, while Caleb and Lila watched, their shoulders touching in quiet companionship. "You know," Lila said softly, "a year ago, I would have been horrified at the thought of standing in the rain, getting my clothes wet, with no schedule or plan." "And now?" Caleb asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now I understand what I was really running from that night. Not just James, or the merger, or my father's manipulations. I was running from a life where everything looked perfect on the surface, but nothing felt true underneath." She squeezed his hand. "I ran away from a wedding where I was just playing a part, and somehow found my way home instead." As Emma rushed back to them, breathless with excitement over a perfect sand dollar she'd discovered, Lila reflected on the strange and winding path that had led her here. The woman who had fled down a rain-soaked road in a ruined wedding gown couldn't have imagined this future. Not the foundation, not the balance she'd struck between her corporate responsibilities and personal fulfillment, and certainly not this unconventional family that had formed from the broken pieces of different lives. The rain continued to fall around them, no longer a symbol of escape and desperation, but of cleansing and renewal, washing away pretense to reveal the authentic lives beneath. Together they turned toward home, a runaway bride who had finally stopped running, a single father who had opened his heart again, and a little girl who had somehow known all along that sometimes family is what you find when you're not looking for it. The piercing scream cut through the humid Florida air like a blade. 8-year-old Willow Sterling had been leaning over the alligator pit railing, her curiosity momentarily overcoming caution. A single slip, a heartbeat of weightlessness, then the horrifying splash as she hit the murky water. Time slowed to a crawl. The massive bull alligator, 16 feet of prehistoric muscle and teeth, turned toward the disturbance. Visitors froze in horror. Zoo staff scrambled for emergency protocols. But one man moved without hesitation. Logan Westerly, a security guard standing nearby, vaulted over the safety barrier in a fluid motion, his weathered hands already drawing the hunting knife from his belt as he plunged into the water between the child and the approaching predator. Alexis Sterling had built her life on careful calculation and meticulous control. As CEO of Sterling Innovations, she transformed a struggling tech startup into a billion-dollar enterprise through sheer determination and strategic brilliance. Her corner office overlooking downtown Miami displayed the trappings of her success: awards, accolades, the evidence of a woman who had conquered the business world. But the photographs on her desk told a different story. They captured moments with her daughter Willow and her late husband James, whose plane had disappeared over the Atlantic 3 years ago. The tragedy had left Alexis hollow, armored in designer suits and protective routines. She scheduled every minute of her day, including the precious hours with Willow, as if structure could ward off further heartbreak. Her executive assistant knew better than to disturb her during board meetings, but when the frantic call came through about the accident at the zoo, Alexis didn't hesitate. She abandoned the quarterly projections mid-sentence, leaving stunned executives in her wake as she raced to her daughter. Logan Westerly's world had contracted to the confines of the Miami Zoological Gardens and the small bungalow he shared with his 10-year-old son, Milo. The walls of their modest home were adorned with hand-drawn sketches of exotic animals and faded photographs of dense jungle canopies, relics of a past life. Before donning the khaki uniform of a zoo security guard, Logan had traversed the most dangerous regions of the Amazon. As a renowned wildlife expert, his intuitive understanding of predator behavior had made him the star of Wilderness Warriors, a documentary series that captivated millions. That life ended abruptly when a flash flood swept through their research camp, claiming several lives, including his wife, Elena. The man who once fearlessly tracked jaguars now moved through life with quiet caution, his adventurous spirit dormant as he focused solely on creating stability for his son. The wild remained in his blood, but he kept it carefully contained, until the moment a child's scream cut through the air, awakening instincts long suppressed. The zoo's medical center buzzed with tense energy as doctors attended to both the rescuer and the rescued. Logan sat stoically on an examination table, wincing slightly as the medical staff cleaned the deep gash on his arm where the alligator's teeth had grazed him. His soaked uniform clung to his athletic frame, water still dripping onto the linoleum floor. In the adjacent room, Willow Sterling lay trembling, her clothes damp and muddied. The physical wounds were minimal, scrapes on her legs and arms, but her wide eyes reflected the shock of her near-fatal encounter. When Alexis Sterling burst through the door, her usual composed demeanor had cracked. Her designer heels clicked rapidly across the floor as she rushed to her daughter, gathering the small girl into her arms with uncharacteristic desperation. "Mommy, I fell," Willow whispered, her voice small and unsteady. "The man with the knife saved me from the big alligator." Alexis looked up, noticing Logan for the first time. Their eyes met across the room, hers filled with gratitude and lingering fear, his calm but weary. She straightened, instinctively reaching for her professional persona like armor. "I need to thank the man who saved my daughter," she told the attending physician, who nodded toward Logan. Alexis approached him with the confident stride that had carried her through countless boardrooms. Up close, she noticed the quiet intensity in his expression, the way his eyes assessed everything with careful attention. She reached into her purse and withdrew her checkbook, a reflex gesture for a woman accustomed to solving problems with financial resources. "I can't begin to express my gratitude," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. "What you did was extraordinary. Please, let me compensate you for your heroism and your injuries." Logan shook his head firmly. "I don't need payment. It's not why I did it." His voice was deeper than she expected, with a quiet authority that surprised her. Before Alexis could respond, the door burst open as a young boy with unruly dark hair, so similar to Logan's, rushed in. "Dad!" he cried out, his eyes widening at the sight of the bandages. "Dad, are you okay?" His small hands reached for his father's uninjured arm, gripping it tightly. "I'm fine, Milo," Logan assured him, his expression softening as he placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "Just a scratch." The boy turned to Alexis, his eyes serious beyond his years. "My dad's never done anything like this before. He always tells me to be careful." The simple statement hung in the air, making the man's actions even more remarkable. Alexis studied Logan with new understanding. Not a professional rescuer or thrill-seeker, but an ordinary man who had done something extraordinary. A father who had risked leaving his own child parentless to save hers. The realization hit her with unexpected force. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Logan Westerly." No title, no elaboration, just the simple facts. "Logan," she repeated, testing the name. "I'm Alexis Sterling, and the little girl you saved is my daughter, Willow." For a moment, none of them spoke. The air conditioning hummed. Medical equipment beeped steadily. Two single parents, two children, connected by a moment of crisis that had revealed something fundamental about human nature, something Alexis had forgotten existed in her carefully controlled world. Willow's nightmares began that same night. She would wake screaming about water and teeth, her small body drenched in sweat. The child psychologist recommended gradual re-exposure to the zoo. Confronting fears in a controlled environment was often the most effective treatment. And so, 1 week after the accident, Alexis found herself reluctantly walking through the zoo's entrance gates. Willow's hand clutched tightly in hers. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had built her career on facing challenges head-on, yet she wanted nothing more than to shield her daughter from this place forever. They found Logan near the educational center, conducting a safety briefing for a group of new security guards. His movements were measured as he demonstrated proper protocols for handling emergencies with dangerous animals. Watching him, Alexis recognized the authority of someone teaching from experience rather than theory. Willow tugged at her hand, surprisingly eager to approach him. When he noticed them, a flicker of surprise crossed his face before he politely excused himself from the group. "Miss Sterling," he acknowledged with a nod. "And Willow, how are you feeling?" To Alexis's astonishment, her normally shy daughter stepped forward. "I'm okay now. Mom says I need to see the alligators again so I won't have bad dreams." The simple honesty of a child, cutting through adult pretense. Logan crouched down to Willow's level, his voice gentle but not condescending. "That's very brave. Would you like to learn more about alligators? Sometimes when we understand things, they're not as scary." As Logan led them to a different viewing area, safer, designed specifically for educational purposes, Alexis noticed a boy sitting on a bench nearby, sketching intently in a notebook. Milo looked up at their approach, recognition flashing across his face. "Are you the girl my dad saved?" he asked Willow directly, with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Willow nodded, suddenly shy again. "I fell in with the alligators." "My dad knows everything about dangerous animals," Milo stated with matter-of-fact pride. "He lived in the jungle and studied them." He tilted his sketchbook to show Willow a remarkably detailed drawing of a jaguar. "I'm going to be a wildlife artist when I grow up." The children's conversation flowed naturally as Logan explained alligator behavior to Willow. How they weren't monsters but animals with predictable patterns, how to respect their territory, why the zoo kept them. His explanations were clear without being frightening, educational without being patronizing. Alexis found herself equally engaged, struck by the depth of his knowledge and his skill in translating it for a child. "Most animals don't want to hurt people," Logan told Willow as she watched the alligators with cautious fascination rather than terror. "They're just trying to protect themselves or their homes. Understanding their signals helps us stay safe around them." Their intended short visit stretched into hours. Milo proudly showed Willow his favorite exhibits, his enthusiasm infectious. Logan guided them through the reptile house, the aviary, the small mammals section. Alexis observed the gradual relaxation in her daughter's posture, the way her eyes brightened with curiosity rather than fear, and she found herself watching Logan, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the respect with which the other zoo employees treated him, the patience he showed with both children. When they finally prepared to leave, Willow surprised everyone by asking, "Can we come back tomorrow?" Alexis hesitated, caught between her instinct to distance themselves from the source of trauma and the undeniable evidence of her daughter's improvement. "Not tomorrow," she compromised, "but perhaps this weekend." As they said their goodbyes, Logan handed Willow a small card. "This is a special pass," he explained. "It means you're learning to be a wildlife guardian. If you come back and learn more about animals, you can get stamps to show your progress." The smile that lit up Willow's face was something Alexis hadn't seen since before the accident, before James's death, if she was honest with herself. She found herself making a decision that wasn't on any schedule or strategic plan. They would return to the zoo, not just for Willow's recovery, but because something about this place and these people had awakened something long dormant in herself as well. The weekend visits became a routine over the following month. Each time, Willow grew more confident around the animals, especially the alligators. Milo appointed himself her unofficial guide, his encyclopedic knowledge of wildlife rivaling many of the adult docents. The children's friendship blossomed naturally, their shared interest in animals bridging the gap between Milo's exuberant enthusiasm and Willow's thoughtful reserve. Logan would join them when his duties allowed, adding depth to their explorations with insights gained from years in the field. Alexis found herself looking forward to these unscheduled hours away from spreadsheets and conference calls. She began bringing work with her, sitting on benches with her laptop while the children explored nearby exhibits under Logan's watchful eye. Gradually, she spent less time on emails and more time observing the subtle interactions between father and son. The way Logan's hand would rest protectively on Milo's shoulder. The silent communication that flowed between them. It was different from her relationship with Willow, less structured, more intuitive, and she found herself both envious and intrigued. One Saturday afternoon, while the children were attending a junior zookeeper workshop, Alexis and Logan found themselves alone by the tropical aviary. The awkward formality that had characterized their early interactions had mellowed into something more comfortable. "Willow seems to be doing much better," Logan observed, watching through the glass as bright-colored birds darted among the foliage. "She approached the crocodile exhibit without hesitation today." "She's sleeping through the night again," Alexis agreed. "The nightmares have stopped." "I can't thank you enough for that, for everything." Logan shrugged off the gratitude, uncomfortable with praise. "Kids are resilient. They bounce back when given the chance. And adults?" The question slipped out before Alexis could filter it. Logan turned to study her, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on whether they want to bounce back or just survive." The insight struck uncomfortably close to home. Alexis had been surviving, not living, since James's death. Creating a safe, stable environment for Willow had become her justification for emotional isolation. Looking at Logan, a man who had clearly suffered his own losses yet remained engaged with the world, she wondered what she might be missing. "How did you end up working security at a zoo?" she asked, genuinely curious about this man who seemed both ordinary and exceptional. "You obviously know more about these animals than most of the staff." A shadow crossed his face. "It's a long story," he said simply. "This job lets me be home for Milo every night. Regular hours, no travel. That's what matters now." Before she could probe further, the children returned, bubbling with excitement about the snake they'd been allowed to touch. The moment passed, but Alexis found herself increasingly curious about the mysteries lurking beneath Logan Westerly's composed surface. The Miami Herald's archives revealed the first piece of the puzzle. Searching for information about the zoo's conservation programs for a potential corporate partnership, Alexis stumbled across a feature article from 5 years earlier. The headline caught her attention immediately. Amazon's wildlife warrior brings jungle to living rooms. The accompanying photograph showed a younger Logan Westerly, standing confidently in dense rainforest, camera crews visible in the background. The man in the image radiated a charismatic intensity completely at odds with the reserved security guard she had come to know. The article described Wilderness Warriors as a groundbreaking documentary series that had brought unprecedented attention to Amazon conservation efforts. Logan Westerly was praised as both its star and its conscience, a rare expert who prioritized ecological truth over sensationalism. His wife, Elena, was mentioned as the series' producer and a respected botanist in her own right. The final paragraph noted that filming for the 4th season was underway in a remote region of Brazil. But there had never been a 4th season. Alexis's further searches revealed the tragic explanation. Headlines from 4 years ago told the story in stark fragments. Flash flood strikes documentary crew in Amazon. 3 dead, 4 injured in Wilderness Warriors tragedy. Producer among casualties in jungle disaster. The most detailed account described how unseasonable rains had caused a flash flood that swept through the base camp without warning. Logan had led rescue efforts, saving several crew members and local guides, but Elena and 2 others couldn't be reached in time. The revelation cast Logan in an entirely new light. Not just a security guard who had acted with unexpected courage, but a man who had once moved through a completely different world. A world of adventure, purpose, and public recognition. What would make someone abandon such a life for the quiet anonymity of zoo security? The articles hinted at controversy surrounding the accident, but the details were vague. Alexis's research was interrupted by a call from her CFO, Marcus Daniels. The board has been reviewing potential expansion opportunities, he began without preamble. There's an interesting property that's come onto our radar, the Miami Zoological Gardens. Her attention sharpened immediately. The zoo? Why would Sterling Innovations be interested in a zoo? Not the zoo itself, Marcus clarified. The land, 20 prime acres in a rapidly developing area of the city. The zoo's been struggling financially for years. Word is they're considering offers. And what would happen to the animals? The staff, Alexis asked, thinking of Willow's newfound passion. Of Milo's drawings? Of Logan? Relocated to other facilities, presumably. The real value is in the development potential. We're thinking a technology-focused resort complex, a showcase for Sterling's latest innovations in hospitality automation. The board wants a feasibility assessment by the end of the month. The conversation left Alexis unsettled. The zoo had become more than just a therapeutic environment for Willow. It had become a rare space where both of them could breathe outside the pressures of their regular lives. The thought of it transformed into another sterile luxury development felt unexpectedly painful. Her disquiet deepened the following day when she attended a lunch with Gerald Hayes, a former documentary producer who had worked briefly with Logan. Ostensibly a meeting about a potential wildlife conservation initiative that Sterling Innovations might sponsor, Alexis found herself steering the conversation toward Wilderness Warriors and its abrupt end. Hayes's expression darkened. Terrible business, that whole tragedy. Changed a lot of lives. Logan Westerly seems to have disappeared from the public eye entirely, Alexis observed, keeping her tone casual. Was that related to the accident? Hayes hesitated, swirling his wine thoughtfully. Off the record? There were questions about the decisions made that day. Logan led the team into an area that some considered too risky, given the weather forecasts. When the flood hit, he chose to evacuate the indigenous guides first, said they had the least emergency training and equipment. By the time they got back for the production team, he shrugged eloquently. His wife was among those who didn't make it out. Lee was blamed? Alexis asked, remembering the man who had instantly risked his life for her daughter. Never officially. The investigation ruled it a natural disaster, unpredictable and unavoidable. But the whispers were enough. That, combined with his grief, he just walked away from everything. Surrendered his contracts, declined interviews, vanished. Last I heard, he was working odd jobs somewhere in Florida. Hayes leaned forward. Why the interest in ancient history? Yes, curious about the background of these conservation initiatives, Alexis deflected smoothly. Sterling Innovations values thorough research. That evening, as she reviewed the preliminary zoo acquisition materials her team had prepared, Alexis found herself unable to concentrate. The clinical assessment of the property's value and development potential felt hollow in light of what she now knew. The zoo wasn't just real estate, it was a sanctuary. For the animals, certainly, but also for people like Logan and Milo, who had found purpose there after tragedy, for Willow, who was healing there, perhaps even for herself. When Willow asked to visit the zoo that weekend, Alexis made an excuse about work commitments. The truth, that she couldn't face Logan knowing what she now knew about both his past and the zoo's potential future, was too complicated to explain. She ignored his text message asking if Willow was feeling well, responding with a brief, impersonal assurance that they were simply busy. The corporate mask was easier to wear than confronting the uncomfortable emotions stirring beneath her carefully maintained surface. The following week brought the formal acquisition proposal before Sterling Innovations' executive committee. As CEO, Alexis could have easily influenced the decision, but she found herself uncharacteristically silent as the discussion unfolded. The financial case was compelling, the return on investment projections were excellent, the synergies with their technology portfolio undeniable. No one mentioned the educational programs that would be lost, the animals that would be displaced, the staff who would lose their specialized jobs. No one had any reason to care about a security guard with a troubled past or his artistic son. Alexis, your thoughts? The board chair's question pulled her from her reverie. The numbers are promising, she responded neutrally. I'd like to review the community impact assessment in greater detail before making a final recommendation. That evening, Willow confronted her with the direct honesty that children often wield more effectively than adults. Why aren't we going to the zoo anymore? I miss Milo. And I didn't finish my wildlife guardian passport. Mr. Logan said I was almost ready for the silver level. Alexis looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw how much she had changed since the accident. The fearful child who had awakened screaming had been replaced by someone more confident, more curious about the world. The zoo visits that Alexis had initially viewed as therapeutic necessity had become genuinely important to Willow. We've been busy, sweetheart, and I thought you might want to try some different activities. Willow's expression grew serious. Is it because of your company? Milo told me his dad is worried the zoo might close because some big company wants to buy it. The innocent question landed like an accusation. What makes you think it has anything to do with my company? Because you stopped taking me there right after you had all those meetings about new projects. Willow's logic was simplistic but cutting in its accuracy. If you close the zoo, where will all the animals go? Where will Mr. Logan and Milo go? The questions haunted Alexis as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her elegant bedroom. When had she become someone who could casually dismantle others' worlds for the sake of a promising balance sheet? When had business strategy become more important than human connection? The answers were uncomfortable. Threads leading back to James's death, to her determination that control and success could insulate her and Willow from further pain. With sudden clarity, Alexis realized she needed to understand the full story, not just about Logan, but about the zoo itself. Making decisions without complete information was contrary to everything she valued as a business leader. If she was going to support or oppose the acquisition, she needed to do so with integrity. The Miami Film Festival's archives held the complete collection of Wilderness Warriors. Alexis spent a full day reviewing episodes, watching the Logan of 4 years ago navigate treacherous terrain with confident ease, explain complex ecological relationships with passionate clarity, and advocate for environmental protection with authentic conviction. The contrast with the quiet man she knew was striking, yet hints of that former self occasionally shone through in the way he taught Willow about animals or guided his fellow security staff. The final episode, the last one completed before the tragedy, contained footage that contradicted the whispered accusations. Far from being reckless, Logan was shown repeatedly checking weather reports, consulting with local guides about terrain safety, and establishing clear emergency protocols. His respect for the indigenous communities was evident in every interaction, not a sudden priority during crisis, but a consistent value that informed all his decisions. Alexis's next stop was the office of Dr. Margaret Chen, the zoo's director of conservation. "I am researching potential philanthropic initiatives," she explained, only partly untruthfully. "I'm particularly interested in understanding the zoo's financial challenges and community impact." Dr. Chen's assessment was candid. "We're operating on the edge, financially speaking. Ticket sales cover basic operations, but our educational programs and conservation efforts depend on grants and donations that are increasingly difficult to secure. And yet you maintain some of the highest animal welfare standards in the country," Alexis noted, having reviewed their accreditation reports. "That's non-negotiable," Chen stated firmly. "We'd close our doors before compromising on that. Every animal here receives exemplary care, whether they're crowd-drawing attractions or critically endangered species that most visitors walk past without noticing." "I understand you employ Logan Westerly," Alexis said, trying to sound casual. "His background seems unusual for security staff." Something protective flashed in Chen's eyes. "Logan is one of our most valuable team members, regardless of his official title. His knowledge of animal behavior has prevented numerous potential incidents, and his salary here comes nowhere close to what he once earned, but he's never complained." She hesitated before adding, "Did you know he anonymously funds our reptile conservation program? Uses the residuals from his old series. Doesn't want recognition, just wants the work done." The final piece clicked into place when Alexis spoke with the zoo's financial director and learned that an anonymous conservation foundation had recently expressed interest in partnering with the zoo, offering substantial funding in exchange for expanded educational programs and research facilities. The opportunity could transform the struggling institution, but only if they retained control of the property. If Sterling Innovations purchased the land, the foundation would take their support elsewhere. Driving home, Alexis finally admitted the truth to herself. Her reluctance to face Logan wasn't about awkwardness or corporate strategy. It was about recognition. In him, she saw a mirror of her own grief and the different paths they had chosen through it. While she had retreated into control and structure, building walls around herself and Willow, Logan had found purpose in quiet service and creating safe spaces for others to learn and grow. His dramatic rescue of Willow wasn't an anomaly. It was consistent with who he was at his core, someone who placed others' needs above his own safety and comfort. The revelation left her both humbled and inspired. For the first time since James's death, Alexis allowed herself to consider whether her carefully constructed life was truly serving its purpose. Was she protecting Willow or limiting her? Was she honoring James's memory or hiding from the pain of it? The questions had no easy answers, but asking them felt like a necessary first step towards something authentic. That night, Alexis worked until dawn, not on acquisition strategies but on an alternative proposal, one that would transform both Sterling Innovations and the Miami Zoological Gardens in unexpected ways. The early morning sunlight cast long shadows across the zoo grounds as Alexis approached the staff entrance. She had timed her arrival deliberately, knowing from Willow's detailed recounting of zoo routines that Logan would be completing his morning security checks before the public arrived. She found him exactly where she expected, by the alligator exhibit, inspecting the reinforced barriers that had been installed after Willow's accident. He looked up at her approach, surprise evident in his expression. "Ms. Sterling, this is unexpected." "Alexis," she corrected him, "and I apologize for our abrupt disappearance. It wasn't fair to the children, or to you." Logan's reserve was palpable. "No explanation necessary, families get busy." "That's not why we stopped coming." The direct admission felt foreign on her tongue. Alexis Sterling, known for strategic communication, choosing blunt honesty instead. "I discovered who you were, who you are. And I learned that my company is considering purchasing this property for development." Something shuddered in his eyes. "I see. And now you're concerned about Willow associating with someone controversial, or are you here to assess the property value personally?" "Neither." Alexis placed a thick folder on the bench beside him. "I'm here to offer a partnership." Logan's confusion was evident as he cautiously opened the folder to find a comprehensive business plan. The cover page read, Sterling Conservation and Technology Center, a proposal for innovation in environmental education. I don't understand, he said finally. Sterling Innovations has the technology and financial resources to transform this zoo into a world-class conservation and education facility, Alexis explained. What we lack is the expertise and authentic commitment to wildlife protection. That's where you come in. She outlined her vision as Logan read through the proposal, a reimagined institution that would combine cutting-edge technology with traditional zoological practices, creating immersive educational experiences while advancing genuine conservation efforts. Sterling would provide the funding and technological infrastructure, the zoo would maintain operational control and expand its wildlife protection programs. And my role in this? Logan asked cautiously. Director of Conservation Education if you want it. Your background makes you uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between scientific research and public engagement. Or you can remain exactly where you are, whatever makes you comfortable. This isn't conditional on your participation. Logan studied her with the same careful attention he might give to an unpredictable animal. Why? Sterling Innovations could make more money developing this land commercially. Because some things matter more than maximizing profit margins, Alexis answered simply. My company has always claimed to value innovation that improves lives. It's time we expanded our definition of lives to include more than just humans. She placed a small USB drive on top of the proposal. This contains the complete restored archives of Wilderness Warriors, all episodes, including behind-the-scenes footage that never aired. At his startled look, she added, I have connections at the Film Festival archives. They were helpful. I haven't watched those in years, Logan said quietly. Not since Elena. I know. And that's your choice. But Milo deserves to see his father as he truly is, a man who has always put others first, whether they're indigenous communities, endangered species, or little girls who fall into alligator pits. Alexis turned to leave, pausing only to add, the board meets next Tuesday to make the final decision. I've recommended the partnership approach, but I can't guarantee the outcome. Either way, Willow and I would like to resume our weekend visits, if that's still welcome. She walked away without waiting for his response, her heart pounding with the unfamiliar sensation of having acted on instinct rather than careful calculation. For the first time in years, she had made herself vulnerable to rejection, to failure. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Sterling Conservation and Technology Center opened its doors 6 months later, heralded as a groundbreaking collaboration between corporate innovation and environmental stewardship. The former Miami Zoological Gardens had been transformed with thoughtful integration of technology, augmented reality experiences that brought extinct species back to virtual life, real-time tracking systems that showed visitors the natural movement patterns of the animals, interactive learning stations that connected the zoo's conservation efforts with field projects around the world. Logan Westerly had accepted the position of Conservation Education Director after considerable deliberation. His first initiative had been to develop a comprehensive training program for security and animal care staff, incorporating his extensive field experience with the latest research in animal behavior. His second had been a complete redesign of the educational materials, replacing simplified anthropomorphism with age-appropriate scientific accuracy. The alligator conservation exhibit, built on the site of Willow's accident, had become one of the center's most popular attractions. Rather than downplaying the dangerous nature of the animals, the exhibit emphasized responsible interaction with predator species and the critical role of apex predators in healthy ecosystems. The safety barriers were now state-of-the-art, virtually invisible to visitors while providing enhanced protection. Alexis found herself spending more time at the center than her executive schedule theoretically allowed. She had initially justified these visits as necessary oversight of Sterling Innovations' significant investment. As weeks passed, she admitted, at least to herself, that her motivations were more personal. She enjoyed watching the growing friendship between Willow and Milo, now official junior conservation ambassadors who led tours for visiting school groups. She appreciated the way Logan had cautiously begun sharing more of his past experiences, integrating stories from his expeditions into the educational programs without sensationalism or self-promotion. Most surprisingly, she valued the gradual evolution of her own relationship with Logan. Their initial awkwardness had given way to professional respect, then to a comfortable collaboration, and finally to something that resembled friendship. They were different in countless ways. She structured and strategic, he intuitive and adaptable. But they shared a fundamental integrity that created an unexpected bridge between their worlds. On a warm evening in early spring, they found themselves alone on the observation deck overlooking the new Amazon rainforest biodome, a spectacular recreation of the ecosystem Logan had once called home. The last visitors had departed. The center was quiet except for the recorded sounds of nocturnal creatures awakening. Milo showed me his college application essays today, Alexis mentioned, leaning against the railing. He's remarkably talented. His wildlife illustrations could easily be published. Logan nodded, pride evident in his expression. The University of Florida's wildlife ecology program would be lucky to have him, though I'm not sure I'm ready for him to leave home just yet. You have 2 years to prepare, Alexis reminded him with a smile. And it's only a few hours' drive. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mist rise among the artificial canopy. So much had changed in the months since Willow's accident, changes neither of them could have anticipated. I never thanked you properly, Logan said quietly. Not just for saving the zoo, but for making me face my past instead of hiding from it. I think we're even, Alexis responded. You saved Willow's life, and in the process you show me that control and caution aren't always the answer. She hesitated before adding, James, my late husband, used to say that life's most important moments rarely appear on any schedule or strategic plan. I forgot that after he died, tried to plan away all the uncertainty. And now? Logan's question was gentle but direct. Alexis turned to face him fully. Now I'm learning to wade into alligator pits when necessary. His laugh was unexpected and genuine, a sound that still surprised her each time she heard it. Impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. The gesture was simple but significant for two people who had built careful walls around themselves for so long. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. No dramatic declarations followed, no promises or grand gestures, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes healing comes in unexpected forms, through facing fears rather than avoiding them, through connections rather than isolation, through embracing life's unpredictability rather than trying to control it. Below them in the staff lounge, Willow and Milo had finished organizing materials for the next day's educational program. Through the window they could see their parents on the observation deck, hands linked, silhouettes outlined against the simulated twilight of the biodome. The children exchanged knowing smiles, their long-running Operation New Family apparently succeeding at last. 1 year to the day after Willow's fall, the Sterling Conservation and Technology Center held a special event commemorating both the accident and the transformation it had inspired. Hundreds of visitors gathered in the outdoor amphitheater as Alexis took the stage, looking uncharacteristically nervous despite her extensive public speaking experience. What happened in our alligator exhibit last year could have been a tragedy, she began. Instead, it became a catalyst for something extraordinary. One person's split-second decision to act with courage rather than caution changed not just my daughter's life, but the future of this entire institution. She gestured toward Logan, who sat in the front row with Milo and Willow on either side of him. We often think of heroes as people who are fearless, but true courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. It's recognizing when something matters more than our own safety or comfort. As she continued her speech, outlining the center's achievements and future plans, Alexis realized how profoundly her perspective had shifted. The businesswoman who had once valued control above all else now embraced collaborative uncertainty. The mother who had tried to protect her daughter through structure and caution now encouraged Willow's adventurous spirit within reasonable boundaries. After the formal presentations concluded, the four of them walked together through the grounds. Willow and Milo raced ahead, eager to show visitors their favorite exhibits.